Hello everybody, in this video I want to give an overview of some of the issues around escaping with regards to self-defense. Now, it's something that does need to be practiced if you are claiming to practice or teach a form of the martial arts that has a self-defense element to it. If you're doing your martial art for sport, for physical fitness, for art, for historical interest, whatever it is, then this is irrelevant, right? But if you are claiming, yes, part of why I do what I do, part of why I teach what I do is for self-defense, then escaping is something you need to practice. Now, escaping is not running away. Right? Running away is a physical action. Escape is a series of techniques, tactics, and strategies that will help you escape and effectively disengage from criminal violence. It's not something that will magically appear on its own. It's something that needs to be practiced and needs to be understood. And one of my observations is a lot of martial artists don't do this. They give it lip service, or they deliberately downplay what it is. In order to give them an excuse not to practice it. Things like, I'm not fit enough to run away, so therefore I've got to stay there and fight. Well, anyone who's done any fighting knows that fighting is way more physically demanding than simply jogging away, right? Not the same thing at all. So that's one we get. Sometimes it's ego. People have this ego idea, I'm not backing down from anyone. I'm not running away from anybody. I mean, all I can really say to that is grow up. Grow up. When it comes to this kind of violence, there are serious consequences, right? If you're attacked and you're ineffective, then there's serious consequences. If you're attacked and you are effective, there can be serious consequences. With regards to legal issues and all this kind of stuff, the fact is that the smart thing to do always is trying to avoid these situations. And if the situation is upon us, if escaping is an option, or we can create it as an option, then that's something that we need to do. Another reason people don't look at escape is they don't understand the nature of criminal violence or its dynamic, and they reinvent it to be the kind of violence they do know. So you see this an awful lot in the martial arts. You'll get people of a given art claiming to teach self-defense, and then they're looking at scenarios which are really what would happen when a practitioner of their art fights another practitioner of their art. Right, we see that an awful lot as well. Submission grapplers or self-defense, I'm rolling around on the ground trying to get him to tap out. You're not. Kickboxers, I'm guard up, moving around trying to knock him out. You're not. The way it should be for self-defense, your goal should be to avoid harm. Legal harm, physical harm, emotional harm, that's what we're trying to achieve. And escape, when correctly understood and correctly practiced, is a really effective option. And it should be something that's included in all practice for those that are claiming to have a self-defense component. Okay, so let's talk about why you should practice escape. And the main reason is it's super effective. So if you're looking at breaking it down, there's two main reasons why you should seek to escape. It's a smart thing to do tactically, and it's a smart thing to do legally. So if we're talking the tactics of it, right? If you're attacked by a group, especially if there's, higher numbers, or even an individual, right? If you can get away from them, if you can create space, once you've got that sufficient space, they can no longer hurt you. Now, we'll talk about how you create that space and how you maintain that space later on. But again, if you're in close range with them or locked onto one of them while others have got free reign, you're in a lot of trouble. Tactically, if you can create space, it aids you. It aids the aim of avoiding harm. So creating space and escaping is the right thing to do tactically in order to achieve the objective of avoiding harm. It's also the right thing to do legally. Now, laws vary across the globe, but generally, there's an acceptance that people can use force in order to keep themselves safe from the criminal acts of others, right? Varies all over the world. And then there's various tests, and then they vary depending on which part of the world you're in. But generally speaking, like talking about here in England and Wales, you're allowed to use force if it's necessary and the force is reasonable. And reasonable has quite a wide definition here in England and Wales, right? On the grounds that, you're not expected to judge to a nicety the level of force used. If the force used is honest and instinctive, that's taken as strong evidence that the force used is reasonable. You're not expected to get all the facts right. You're judged on what you honestly believed it to be, even if you're mistaken and even if the belief was an unreasonable one. so long as you can demonstrate that it was honestly held. This is how the law kind of works here. And it may be different depending on where you are. But we're not allowed to take vengeance. We're not allowed to act as our own vigilantes. So if we were attacked and we hit the guy and he hits the ground and then we continue to kind of kick him in the head while he's on the floor, the law may decide the initial action was legal, the subsequent punishment actions, or the ones done out of anger, or even habit in the case of some martial artists, are illegal. So one of the things that we need to practice is using our skills, combat skills if you like, combative skills, in order to facilitate escape. That's a smart thing to do. We'll talk more about that later on, but it needs to be instilled to the point of habit. That the moment you think, right, that guy is sufficiently disorientated or sufficiently disabled that I believe I can make an effective escape now. Now, rather than staying there and trying to finish the fight, which may be a problem tactically, legally, accomplices running, he gets back into the fight, you get badly injured as a result. There's lots of reasons to escape, but legally, again, very smart too, right? It's going to look right to all witnesses. Everyone's going to see it. Now, if you compare this with, say, let's take a typical MMA finish. I'm not knocking MMA here. This is the right thing to do within the context of an MMA bout. In an MMA bout, you knock a guy to the ground. As soon as it's on the ground, what they often do is jump on top of them, get the knee on there, and keep hitting until the referee goes, okay, you've won. You've started winning, so you keep winning until the referee concludes you've won this fight. It's the right thing to do in that context. If you do the same thing within a self-defense context, let's say that's the habit, that's the way you've trained, right? That's what you do. So you bang, 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 the guy hits the ground, you jump, you put your knee on his belly, and you continue to punch. What's he going to say happened? He's not going to say, well, actually, I had that coming really because I did start it. It's criminal. He's going to lie, right? It's what they do. It's in his own self-interest to lie, so he's going to do it. He's going, wasn't me, that guy started. Look at what he did to me. Look at what he did to my face. Witnesses, what are they going to say? Well, I didn't see it start, but what I saw was that guy kneeling on his chest, repeatedly punching him in the face. Very problematic legally. But what the same witnesses see if you go bang, bang, and the guy drops, instantly backing away. Stay down, don't hurt me, someone help me, someone help me. What have they seen? So legally you're in a much better position. Tactically, again, you're in a much better position. Because even if you're winning the fight with the guy you've got pinned to the ground and you're punching, what about his friends or accomplices? What about third parties? I mean, again, it varies from around the world, but here in the UK, I'll be careful, here in England and Wales, not the whole of the UK, because Scotland's a little bit different. Northern Ireland too, but for England and Wales, when they look at the crime statistics for those two countries, when it varies from year to year, but roughly, when the people aren't known to one another, 40% of all violent crime involves more than one person. Right? So that's a high percentage. It's a high percentage to take a risk on. Right? So there's lots of reasons why your habit needs to be, I escape as soon as I can. Now, when it comes to legally, sometimes people will give that lip service, or they want rid of it because they don't know it. They've never spent time studying it. So rather than correcting that error in their understanding, their practice, their teaching, what they do is they downplay it. I don't need to know that. Better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6 and all that kind of stuff. Again, I think it's 15 in Scotland, so... I acknowledge my Scottish ancestry, and I know they sometimes get a little bit upset about being lumped with the rest, right? But anyway, they just downplay it. They just kind of wave it away. Right? Or things like, well, you can't think about the law in the middle of a fight. You're absolutely right. You cannot think about the law in the middle of a fight. So do you know when you do think about it? When you're training, when you're teaching, when you're practicing. So what happens is you develop the habit. So those who've trained with me will know this is something we do a lot, right? Within that self-defense context, even when we're drilling the kata bunkai, we put it in this context. That what we'll do is, it's a sudden blitz of activity to weaken, disorientate, to remove the enemy's ability to give chase or his desire to give chase, which we'll talk more about in a minute, and then you escape. We practice it over and over and over again. So it's habit. What we don't do is always fight to a finish. Right? Because the danger with that is you do that and it's a mistake tactically and legally. So we're going to get into more about the tactics and strategy of escape now. But it's very, very important that it is something that is included. And always be a little bit suspicious when people just try and wave it away. It's normally because they don't know it and they don't want to know it because it's an inconvenience to them because what they already know is perfect. But if you're serious about self-defense properly, it's something you should learn, it's something you should practice. So as we mentioned earlier, escaping is not running away. Right? Sometimes people, again, same as we've talked about, they don't know it. They don't know it. They haven't practiced it. They don't understand it, so they want to wave escaping away. It's not a valid option, right? Is how they would have it. So they'll do things like, well, what if he's a better runner than you? Well, what if he's a better fighter than me? You know what I mean? And the fact is, you make sure he's not a better runner than you, right? Which is what we're going to talk about now. So the two key things that you need to achieve in order to ensure you escape effectively. And again, it's not just a matter of, I don't like the look of this situation, I'm going to sprint. We're assuming for the purpose of this video, we're not talking about avoidance, we're talking about escaping. So it's kind of already there. It's already on your doorstep. How do I escape this? The two key things that you need, right? You need the person or persons to be unable or unwilling to give effective chase. Right? And you need to be able to achieve those two things as part of your escape strategy. If you just turn and run, you haven't done either of them, right? They may be perfectly able to carry on chasing you, and they may be totally willing to carry on chasing you. So you need to do things that will take away their ability to give chase or their desire to give chase, or a combination of the two. So let's talk about the first one. They're unable to give chase. So one of the things that we often practice is the preemption. Against groups too, I've been within the app, there's instruction on how to do that. And those who train with me, we do escaping against group where you're preempting, you're acting first to cause chaos within the group. When you have a legitimate, honestly held belief, there's no way to avoid this other than doing that, right? Against individuals, it's the same. Preemption is one of the few things that work consistently. So therefore, it should be a fundamental part of again, self-defense practice. In my own dojo, we teach it to white belts, and they do it in various scenarios for every grade up. So the idea of being able to manage a situation verbally, to be able to talk with your hands, you're already covering the lines of attack. You're already creating a physical and psychological barrier. You're creating something that if it's touched, it'll trigger certain reactions. There's a lot to it, which I'm not going to cover here. And then when you believe it's appropriate, you preempt without any warning. As soon as you've done that, you're out of there. If it's a heavy hit, then the guy's kind of disorientated, maybe unconscious, but he's going to be disorientated. It's going to take him a second to what the hell just happened? By the time they figure that out, you've started to gain distance. Right? And then there's an argument, well, maybe they'll just sprint after you. And they may. And if they do, then you're no worse off than you were a few seconds ago, right? But there's means and methods to do this. Now again, it may be as well that the hit was just so hard he thinks I don't want more of that. Which brings us to the unwilling to give chase, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. If the situation has gone beyond that, and we're already kind of locked on, then the aim is to overwhelm and kind of blitz them. So it's not like a square go fight where there's a bit of back and forth. Love all that stuff, it's great fun. Out fighting other martial artists, training to fight other martial artists. I'm not downplaying it, it's great. But when you talk about criminal violence, the criminal doesn't want that. They want to overwhelm you with violence. And what do you want to do? You want to overwhelm them with violence. It's very different. You start winning and you keep winning until you've won. That's we've done it. Win in this case being not getting harmed, right? So you'll overwhelm you and you kind of blitz. Now the two main targets we're looking for when we do that, the main things are the head, obviously. So again, if they're orientated, they don't know what's going on, they're unconscious, then they can't effectively give chase. The other one that we'll work on is strikes to the legs. This can include while they're standing, so strong knees into the thighs from there, stamps down onto the feet. If the opponent hits the ground, you probably don't want to, for legal purposes, kick them in the head or the body, right? That could cause a lot of damage. But if you stamp on their legs, it's going to do far less damage, but they're going to struggle to get up. And if they do get up, as a joke, they'll be coming after you like a zombie out of The Walking Dead, right? They'll only have one function and lower limb. So, striking the head or the legs. The body can be an effective target. Obviously, if you wind them or you break something, fine. But the main two that we're looking for when we escape is to take away their ability because they can't think properly, or you take away their ability by striking the legs because they can't run properly. So again, that's what we're looking for, that they're unable to give chase, effective chase. Another part of that can be, which again are things that people don't consider, but it's like, well, what? Let's say you're near your car. Well, you get in your car and you lock the doors and you drive off. They're now unable to give effective chase because there's a car door that's locked between the two of you and you're away. Right? What about if you it's on a street? Like, let's say it's a street and it's there's bouncers on the door of a particular nightclub or pub or something. You know, if you run past through the bouncers and the bouncers kind of close in behind you and stop this person giving chase, they're unable to give chase because there's people there to help you, right? You physically blocked it. You can overturn objects. Can be another thing that can do it as well. You know, lots of reasons, that kind of physical barriers that stop them from, that they can't give chase. That's one thing. We make them unable to do it. It's like I always joke, when people say, well, what if he's a better runner than you? I say, I am 100% confident I can outrun Usain Bolt, little old short stubby legged me, right? 53-year-old me. I can outrun Usain Bolt over 100 meters if I'm allowed to punch him in the head before we set off. Right? Because by the time he's got up or worked out what's going on, I can, just slowly jog across that line, right? Story I often tell, I won't go into too many details, but I know someone who effectively escaped in one high-heeled shoe because she kicked a guy who wouldn't keep his hands to himself, kept grabbing her arms. She kicked the guy with one of her legs, the high-heeled shoe went into his thigh effectively, screaming with pain. She lost the shoe, but then she just waddled, as she put it, through the entrance into a bar where there's lots of other people there, right? The guy doesn't give chase, which brings us to the next thing. They're unwilling to give chase. So in this case, the guy, he's not going to barge into the pub because there's 1,000 witnesses there as to what he was doing. He's not going to do it. So if you're escaping and you're drawing attention to the fact that you're escaping, you're shouting, for help, you're shouting out, stay back, this person's trying to attack me, whatever it is, you're drawing attention to it. The criminal doesn't want that because they risk being discovered. The risk-reward ratio for them is now all off. The risk has gone way up, right? They're going to get discovered. They're going to get into trouble. They're going to find themselves imprisoned for their actions. They are not wanting to give chase in that way. And again, it's really obvious what they're doing at that point. If you've got two people here and it all kicks off, well, he said, she said, right? You can argue it was one way or the other way, as the criminal will try and do. But if you're sprinting away and the other person's running after you, it's clear to everybody that that guy's in the wrong, and the criminal knows that. So unless it's anger's taken over, the smart one will go, I ain't doing it. I'm not giving chase. While you're doing that as well, it's not just running. People have this idea that you kind of run away from the criminal and 2 hours later you're tipping water bottles off your head and you're still running. Often as not, we're talking about short little bursts. So you run to a place where there's lots of other people. You run into a store. You run into a club. You run towards bouncers. You run towards security people. You run out of an alleyway into a well-lit area. You know what I mean? There's lots of things you can do. At that point, the criminal goes, I'm not following. You run to where there are security cameras. You try and recruit bystanders. Help. And somebody, sees and, are you okay? What's going on? That guy's giving chase. At that point, they go, I'm not willing to do this now. There's two of them. I'm going to get discovered. I'm going to back off. Right, so there's a whole host of these things that need practice to their habit. It's not just enough to go, run away if you can, as a lot of people do. It needs to be understood and it needs to be practiced. Do you practice escaping? If you don't, well, how on earth do you expect to be able to do it? It will not be the habit that we've talked about. So we need to include it in our practice. Getting into the habit of when your training partner starts to move or fall or back off and you think, now's my chance, boom, I'm off. And you're not always having that fighting mentality where you're trying to win the fight. You realize the smart things to do, tactically to escape. And to escape, it's not just running away. You need to do things that make sure that the criminal is unable and or unwilling to give chase. When you've achieved those things, you can get a relatively short distance and you've effectively escaped. So I obviously can't cover everything in a video such as this, and invariably, for those people who don't want to practice escaping, who have spent a lot of time invested in fighting skills only and see that as being the key to self-defense. They don't know the personal security stuff. they don't know about the law, they don't know about criminal behavior, all that kind of stuff, effective boundary setting, tons of other stuff that to effectively teach self-defense you need to be aware of. You know, and you can do that alongside the martial arts, but it's not quite the same thing. And escaping is part of this. Obviously, you can't cover it all in one video. So again, those who are more familiar with this, who've done it, will know that we do practice escaping when there's other people with you. You know, sometimes, oh, I have to stay and fight. Really? Really? You know, this person that you're trying to protect, you're going to stay in the dangerous situation. Why don't you practice ways in which you can help them escape? You know, and you can deal with the situation in a way where you both get out of there. Is that something you've practiced? Have you looked at the tactics and the techniques and the strategies of that? If you haven't, it's something you need to do if you're legitimately claiming self-defense is part of it. It is so important. And again, I hope, you know, it's something I clearly feel passionate about. But I hope in the video, something I've conveyed is it doesn't mean that all the other stuff is wrong. It's another little bugbear, maybe a series for another video of mine, that self-defense tends to be the gold standard by which everything is judged, and it doesn't need to be within the wider martial arts. You know, some people do it for the health benefits, and that's great. Some people do it because they like the way it makes their body feel. Great. Some people do it because they like competing and they like the adrenaline of that. That's all wonderful stuff that we can do. We just need to make sure that when we're in any given lane, we know what we're doing, right? So, for example, you know, if someone says, you know, I want to enter this kickboxing tournament, I wouldn't say, well, okay, run away. You know, like, preempt, hit before you've even started the bout, run up, jump out the ring and run off. Because obviously they're going to lose, right? They're going to lose the fight. The fundamental thing is the goal always determines the optimum strategies. The strategy determines the tactics, and the tactics will determine the choice of technique. If you change the goal, everything else changes. So if your goal is to submit this person, outpunch this person, score more points than this person within a given context, that will determine what strategy, tactics, and techniques you use. If your aim is to avoid harm, it changes everything underneath. Right? So no longer will you be looking to do those techniques that will like pin a person, hold a person, all that kind of stuff. It becomes different. Or continue hitting a person when they're on the ground or anything like that. You know, even simple things like, you know, you see boxers knock each other out and throw their arms up in the air like, hey, I won, great. You know, you enjoy that moment. Don't do that in self-defense, because what does that look like on a camera? That looks like, you know, you may have been acting entirely legitimately, but with these little acts of celebration, or karate guy, big loud shouts when they score the punches and stuff. Right? It's not always the right thing to do, because in the legal world that comes with self-defense, it becomes different. There's a lot to this stuff. So for some of you, you'll be nodding along going, yep, I agree, yep, done all of that, fully get it, you know, I get it. Some of you may not agree, and that's fine, you do you, you know. But for some of you, the ones I hope you're watching, oh, actually, that's the point. You know, I mean, I do want to teach self-defense properly. I do want to practice it properly. And maybe escaping is something I need to look into, because there's a lot to it. It's not just running away. It's not something that can just be waved away. It's something that needs to be thoroughly understood and practiced properly. So for the people who practice it, it becomes the habit. They don't even think about it. They do the right thing tactically and legally, and they escape, because that's the conditioned habit that the training has given them for self-defense. It's one of the most effective things you can do.